Well, hello, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. My name's Dan Alstrand, again filling in for Todd this week. Well, I hope that you woke up on time this morning. I'm going to bet that several of you didn't. After last night's wind knocked out power to thousands in HRM. Steady winds anywhere from 30 to 50 kilometers an hour reported at Stanfield International Airport, with a gust at 3 o'clock this morning at 70 kilometers an hour. Now, those are strong winds, but I know many of you are wondering why we lose power so often. Winds are not exclusive to Nova Scotia, right? Seems like clockwork when a storm like the one overnight last night blow through and we lose power. I know electricity rates have featured in the provincial election campaign, but I think we should be demanding stronger resiliency in our network, should we not? A few elections ago, we heard Stephen McNeil campaign on breaking the monopoly that is Nova Scotia Power. And that just didn't happen. And I don't see it happening anytime soon. Question for you when we open up the lines for the Mid-Week Meltdown at noon today. What do we do with Nova Scotia Power? Don't forget, Dr. John Gillis will be here after the news at 11. Your chance to ask a doctor your questions. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. While the election campaign drags on, I received an interesting release from the PCs before we went to the air this morning. Now, they're alleging that people are already lining up to replace Liberal leader Zach Churchill, even with 2 weeks in the campaign. Here's a clip of the endorsement from former Liberal MP Scott Bryson for King South Liberal candidate Mike Ham.
Now, I'm not in public life today. I'm not in elected office. But someday when I return to politics, I will want someone like Mike Ham on my team. And I hope you elect him to be on your team as a good MLA for King South.
Interesting, isn't it? Haven't heard much from Scott Bryson since he left his post in Ottawa. A political comeback, perhaps? I guess time will tell. I wonder what our first guest thinks about that. We'll get Tom Urbaniuk back on the line here in a minute. We seem to have lost him in the wind and the ether as we move forward. Interesting, the ongoing debate over the scandal, as it's being called, in down in Lunenburg with the coffee cards giving out at the drive-through. A conservative candidate giving out coffee cards, or at least a conservative candidate's worker giving out coffee cards. The candidate standing at the end of the drive-through. That conservative worker resigned post yesterday. Now calls from the Liberals for the candidate to step away from the election campaign. It's heating up, isn't it? And I think we're getting into desperate times as we move forward. Let's see if this works this time. Tom, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Dan.
How are you?
Very good. How are you? Sorry about the disconnection there.
It's all good. Tom Urbaniuk is, of course, a professor of political science at Cape Breton University, and he joins us on the line. I guess before we get to what we originally talked about, we were going to discuss today, Scott Bryson making that endorsement, saying that when he comes back to politics, that raising a few eyebrows today.
Yes, I think we've had a few sort of interesting endorsements, including during this provincial election campaign. The David Dingwall endorsement is also newsworthy. So, things are moving, even though we've had a very quiet provincial election campaign.
Tom, is it difficult? Will it be difficult for the next 2 weeks for particularly the Liberal Party, who are in most jurisdictions in a distant third position with the PC so far out ahead, at least in the latest round of polling?
It is a very difficult situation for the Liberal Party. There is a moment of opportunity, and that's tomorrow. There is the leaders' debate that will be broadcast at 6 p.m. tomorrow. And that, for many Nova Scotians, will be a first time of serious reflection about the forthcoming provincial election. This campaign has been short, so it's the shortest possible campaign under the law. It was distracted, or Nova Scotians were distracted in part, I think, by the U.S. election, which had the world mesmerized. We had the Remembrance Day long weekend, which is a downtime from overt campaigning. So there hasn't been a lot of opportunity for the Liberals and the NDP to pierce through the fog of public discussion until now. So we'll see what these next 2 weeks bring, but time is short.
We're seeing a lot of promises made, particularly from the PCs who have a rather commanding lead in the polls. Tom, one of them was announced a couple of weeks ago, and that was a plan to take the tolls off of the McDonald and the McKay Bridge here in Halifax. You wrote an opinion piece in the Herald that says that's a bad idea. I guess the first question is, why is it a bad idea?
I'm very concerned about the loss to provincial revenue, which will be $40 to $50 million a year. This is at a time when the provincial finances are actually becoming a little gloomier. I know there's a tradition in this province of giving midterm reports showing deficits that then are at least partially wiped out by the time the final fiscal year reports are given. But the reports that we had in September do suggest that the provincial finances are looking gloomier, in part because population growth is slowing. So a $654 million deficit was forecast. 40 to 50 million would be essentially put aside from the provincial budget every year going forward, and that is the revenue for the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission, which is commonly known as Halifax Harbour Bridges. So that is a self-financed provincial crown corporation which uses that revenue to maintain the bridges, to save for future major capital projects, to do communication to motorists focused specifically on conditions on those bridges. I'm concerned that without that own source revenue, the commission will likely be folded into the provincial Department of Public Works. And with that, I think we'll have a dilution of some of the specialized technical skill that has been developed over the years, including contacts, relationships with international partners responsible for major suspension bridges in their jurisdictions.
We're always seem to be having maintenance done on those bridges, right? And that's on a very tight schedule if we believe, and we have no reason to doubt, the people at Halifax Harbour Bridges. That being said, when governments take things over, things tend to change when it comes to that, right?
Yes, I mean, in theory, how the Halifax Dartmouth Bridge Commission could remain, but it would depend on an annual subsidy from the provincial government. I'm not sure that Tim Houston has thought that through, the administration, the operations of the bridges, which do require a lot of technical skill. Like, these are major suspension bridges. Tim Houston has cited a reduction in congestion as the main reason for this policy. And in fact, if you look at the PC platform, I think it's page 13, that is the reason given. So if you eliminate the toll plazas, supposedly you will reduce congestion. I'm not sure that that has been carefully researched. The PC leader says that he has had some expert advice, but that hasn't been released. What the toll plazas do is they serve as an organized funneling mechanism. So for traffic to merge onto the relatively narrow bridges. And let's also recall that at most of the toll booths, there are not transactions taking place. There are 350,000 Mac Pass users. About 75 to 80% of people who are using the bridges have Mac Passes. So that traffic is being processed fairly quickly already. And if there is congestion, there are other reasons for it. Now, I'm not arguing that most motorists would dramatically change their behavior if they didn't have to pay the $1 or $1.25 toll. But it is a focused moment of cost consciousness. So it might, in a few instances, encourage motorists to complete their business on one side of the harbor before returning to the other side of the harbor, thereby reducing the number of kilometers driven by that vehicle in a congested city. I should also express concern about the lamentable state of some of the infrastructure in other parts of Nova Scotia. So as a Cape Bretoner, I'm happy to pay to use the bridges when I come to Halifax, but I'm concerned that the $40 to $50 million that is lost will affect the schedule for the upgrading of some of the infrastructure around me and in other regions of the province. We have the recent Stats Canada report showing that only 27% of provincial roads in Nova Scotia are classified as being in good condition or better than good condition, which makes us a laggard in Canada.
That was my next question, Tom, is how well does this play outside of HRM, forcing somebody from Sydney or from Yarmouth or from Amherst to who likely don't use the bridges a lot to pay for their maintenance?
Yeah, there are many issues in this provincial election campaign, and so this might not be all determinative for most voters, but I don't think it plays super well outside the HRM. Of course, the political calculation is that it will get noticed by people who regularly use the bridges in the HRM and have a positive impact on their decision-making in reference to the PCs, and be kind of in the background for most other voters. But we'll see. Again, if it starts to figure into maybe a larger narrative about management of public finances or priorities or discussions about whether the healthcare system really has been fixed as promised, then that could start to be an issue. I'll watch the debate tomorrow night to see how maybe that plays into some of these larger narratives.
Tom, it feels like the PCs are spending a lot of money on this campaign, and the reason why I say that is, we've been told that they are going to reduce HST by a single point to 14%. There's $40 million for the bridge. There's $4 million for a new clinic. There's a drop in the small business tax rate, which was announced yesterday from 2% or 2.5% to 1.5%. Free parking at Nova Scotia hospitals at a cost of $8 million. It feels like they're spending an awful lot of money that we know where the budgets are tight.
Yeah, yes, and we can pose the same question to all the parties. Essentially, the parties are sort of playing in the same space, announcing tax breaks or even somewhat symbolic measures that are meant to persuade voters that they are very conscious of the affordability concerns, the affordability crisis being experienced by many Nova Scotians. But I'm not seeing a lot of policy proposals on the revenue side. So population growth will slow, and in fact, the three major parties are not advocating for maintaining the pace of population growth that we have recently seen, and with legitimate reason in terms of being able to provide adequate services for Nova Scotians and just to keep up. But of course, that does have impact on revenue forecasts as well. And so I'm not seeing a lot of policy yet on how we're going to be generating that additional revenue, how we're going to be growing the tax base.
Tom, we'll have to keep an eye on that debate and the campaign as it draws to its conclusion. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Dan. Have a good day.
That is Tom Urbaniuk, political science professor at Cape Breton University. It's a lot of money. It just feels like it's a lot of money. That HST cut itself is a lot of money, not to mention all the other things that we listed, and an additional $40 to $50 million a year in lost revenue on the Halifax Harbour bridges that was designed in part to perform maintenance, because we know those bridges are old. The Liberal Party, Zach Churchill in our studio when he was here, saying that we're going to have to build a new McKay Bridge. And he's not the only one that's saying that, but he's got a plan in his platform at $750 million. There's big dollars being spent here. All the parties are talking about big dollars. We'll have to see it all shakes out. Did you know that November is Thank a Business Month? We'll have a conversation with the president and CEO of the Better Business Bureau. Julia Lewis will be our guest. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Dan Olstrand here. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Still to come in this half hour, we'll have a conversation with a researcher at Dalhousie University. You may have seen these things floating around the Northwest Arm. They're working on an inexpensive way to make salt water drinkable. They're using like used tires and stuff in this, and it's fascinating to me, and we know there is water scarcity across the planet, and this could be a game changer should it work. We'll have a conversation with one of the researchers on that as part of the program today, so I hope you stick around for that. But before we do that, did you know that it's Thank a Business Month? The Better Business Bureau is having, I think this is its second one. We're very pleased to welcome to the program today to tell us a little bit about it. From the Better Business Bureau, President and CEO Julia Lewis. Julia, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks.
I guess before we get into what Thank a Business Month is, let's maybe tell everybody what the Better Business Bureau is and what it does.
Right. So the Better Business Bureau, we're a not-for-profit organization, and we focus on basically advancing trust in the marketplace.
So people can come to you if they perhaps have had a bad experience at a business, and you'll take a look at it? Is that how it kind of operates?
Right. So we offer an accreditation program for businesses. So we fully vet businesses and provide that information to the public. And then we also have information on all other businesses within the Atlantic provinces. And people can come to us for information about those businesses. They can come if they're having an issue with a business, or even as with this initiative, to thank a business and leave a positive customer review.
So tell us a little bit about this initiative. This is the second time you've done this, correct?
Right. This is the second year, and we're just trying to, we all know that people, use the internet as a platform, and we're just trying to inspire people to use that for good and try to build up some of these small businesses in our community by leaving positive customer reviews for them. We know that, reviews are a really utilized tool in terms of making purchasing decisions, so it's just another way to help local small businesses.
We take a lot of calls here on this program, and myself and the regular host of this program, Todd Veinotte, will tell you that people don't call here because they're happy. They usually call here because they're mad about something, right? This is I would imagine the same experience that you have at the Better Business Bureau, but you're using this opportunity to maybe get some laurels onto some of the hardworking business and business owners that we have out there.
That's right, because a lot of businesses will often shy away from asking or reaching out for customer reviews, right? Because they're scared of receiving that negative review. Because, like you said, people tend to reach out when they're upset, not when they're happy. So exactly, we're just trying to inspire the opposite as well. So to encourage businesses to reach out for, those reviews, and to encourage consumers to get out there and leave them.
Those reviews are really important. As you mentioned today, a lot of consumer activity happens online, and many use those reviews as sort of their gauge as to whether or not they're going to do business with a company.
Exactly. Like we're seeing numbers, over 80% of consumers are reading online reviews, and then about 50% of those are always reading reviews. And we've seen stats that have shown that, businesses that have 5 reviews or more have, 2 and 3 times greater likelihood of a purchase as opposed to a business that has no reviews. So they really are important. Like we know as consumers that, the first thing you're going to look at is other people's experiences with these businesses, right? So they're important. And, it's just as important to have those reviews of people's positive experiences as it is to have reviews of their negative ones.
If someone wants to take part in this Thank a Business Month program, how do they do so? Do they just go onto the company's website? Do you have a portal? How does that work?
Yeah, we do have a customer review portal on our website. You can come to bbb.org and you can search any local business. And then there is an option to leave a customer review, and our customer reviews are vetted, so we always ensure that the consumer is actually a consumer of that business and not just someone who's looking to, maybe troll that business or something like that. And we give the business time to respond before we make those customer reviews public. So it's a really great tool that consumers and businesses can use. And
they're genuine, right? They're not made up, or it's not a bot or something along those lines. Exactly. We have vetting in place so that we can limit any instances of that. Yep. Julia, appreciate your time. All right. Well, thanks for having me. It was great. That is Julia Lewis, the president and CEO of the Better Business Bureau. How often do you do it? I know I do it. Right? If I'm buying something online now, I don't buy as much online as most. I know you won't find that to be too outlandish a statement from me, but I know Vanessa does a lot of online shopping, and I know that many people in my circle, in my family, and my colleagues are online shoppers. And how important are those reviews to you? I'm certainly digging deep into the weeds on them, and I often wonder, it's like, are these legit? Like, is this somebody that had a bad experience with a company or a service or an organization that's going to town on it with these reviews, or is this the business owner or their employee trying to sort of to seed the deck, so to speak, when it comes to the reviews? But a process like this, I think is quite valuable because it's vetted, right? These are real people. They're not bots or some service that you've purchased to make your reviews look better or something along those lines. And as I mentioned, and I know Vanessa will back me on this one, that people don't leave reviews, at least in our experience, or call radio stations when they're happy. It's usually because they're upset about things. We're getting ready to take our next break here on the program. When we come back, a conversation with Con O'Brien. If you don't know who Con O'Brien is, you know who the Irish Descendants are. And they've got a Christmas tour and a new box set. Can you believe the Irish Descendants have been around for 35 years? I was blown away when I saw that. I've obviously been listening to the Irish Descendants for many, many years. I know many of you out there have, and it always is this time of the year, right? Right after Remembrance Day, and we start to get into that slow build towards Christmas. Although my neighborhood went from 0 to 60, it seems, with a number of Christmas lights I saw last night. But we know that's slow build toward Christmas, and they're going to hit the tour, and I know many of you have seen them before, and they put on a fantastic performance. A conversation with Con O'Brien when we come back to the program. Right after the news, you're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in just minutes.
12 o'clock hill is dark and still, snow is tumbling down. This Christmas time there's hope again for all in Mabelstown. With love and understanding we'll find a better way. The gift of peace is ours now on this Christmas day.
It almost feels like it's not Christmas around here unless you're listening to the Irish Descendants and some of their festive tunes, but and we will have the opportunity to catch some of those tunes here very shortly as a tour is getting kicked off in about a week or so, maybe 10 days, and we'll have an opportunity to catch a little bit of a mashup. Is that the way I should call it, Con? Is it a mashup with the Irish Descendants and Rum Ragged? Is that a good descriptor?
I suppose you could call it a mashup. We are very fortunate to have two members of Rum Ragged come out with us, and we assemble on stage then as a 6-piece band this way. It's not like they're special guests; they come right into the show with us. So it's a powerful old group of musicians together. So. It's a good mashup. How about that?
That sounds great, Con. Con O'Brien, of course, the longtime frontman of the Irish Descendants. Con, this is a time of year. I know that you guys traditionally hit the road, and I know that fans here in our part of the world look forward to seeing y'all.
Well, we've been at it a long time, Dan. We're coming up on 35 years, and for us. Halifax's old stomping grounds. The first place that we ever played outside of Newfoundland, playing in the pubs back in the early 90s, was down at the lower deck. And I remember being over to Nova Scotia, playing the lower deck 2 weekends or 2 weeks back to back every month for about 2 years. So back in the olden days, we spent a lot of time there. And for us kicking off the tour, we start in Liverpool, but the second night is at the Cohen, and it's going to be lovely for us. Especially, I've had lots of great nights at the Rebecca Cohen, and we're hoping for a great night there this year with the Christmas show.
It's a wonderful facility, is it not?
It is. It's one of those. It's one of our premier auditoriums and theaters in the country, and so it's for us to get over and play in that is a wonderful thing. And 35 years later, the band is still at it. I mean, I think this tour is 26 shows in 30 days, so there's not much rest. Nowadays the average age of the Irish Descendants, and we just added a young lady on fiddle. She's 21, so we're back down to the late 30s now. So and I'm delighted.
You moved the average age down a little bit. That's pretty cool.
I moved the average age back another bit. I must say it's been fulfilling. But 35 years is quite a legacy. I only have another 15 to go. I want to be as good as the Irish Rovers, who are celebrating 50 years right now. And so this next year coming up, we'll have a great bit of celebrating and get out there and keep getting out. We just do quietly go about our business and do shows all year long. And I've been very fortunate to be part of that, and as the only original member left. But I've been that way since like 2001, so it's not new for me. But it's wonderful. We have fans everywhere. It's just over the Celtic colours, and all the drivers that were taking me around for the shows. Oh my God, you guys were one of our first. But we've been there a long time, and when that big Celtic wave struck the east coast of Canada, and Toronto industry started looking at us, we were one of the first bands, and to be part of that legacy is very special indeed.
Con, you mentioned 35 years as a group, and you're going to celebrate that with a pretty cool offering.
We do. We're putting out we're going to vinyl for the very first time. We were the first we were the first band in Newfoundland to release a CD. Yeah, and we'll probably be the last one as well. But in any case, we've gone through that format, and we're back now. And the kids are all buying, and the nostalgia of vinyl and LPs are back. So we decided to not do it in a small way. So we have a box set to commemorate our 35th anniversary, which is quite a milestone. There's 3 vinyl albums in it. You'll get pretty well the whole repertoire of the band on 3 CDs. We have very proud of 100-page history of the band. We're kind of a coffee table, glossy, beautifully well done, designed by the great Judd Haynes from over here, and everybody in the music industry who's done anything knows Judd. And it's very, very special. I spent the last year working on that and writing the history of it. Was a rundown memory lane, and listening to it and realizing what we had done. Over the years, you thought things pass and go by, and you're always trying to break new ground, even 35 years later. But we broke a lot of ground. We paved the way for a lot of bands. I mean, we had great commercial success. We weren't a radio band, but we signed the first East Coast band to sign for Warner Music, and it was an international recording deal back in 1993. And then after that, they asked us, who else would you suggest? And our first instinct was to say Great Big Sea. For sure. And Great Big Sea go on to have multi-platinum albums. And you look what they've done. Another one that comes out of that fold is Natalie. Yeah. Natalie was signed, I believe, on Warner right after that. So, as the industry grew, back then we were dealing with Rita and the Rankins, and, we were watching bands like the Bar McNeils, and we were very fortunate to be part of that. And that community still is stronger and stronger than it has ever been. And to have been a part of that and still be a part of it 35 years later is a very fulfilling thing.
Con, when does the box set hit shelves?
Well, where you have the pre-orders, if you want to go for tickets to the shows or to order the box set, you go right on the IrishDescendants.com. I am told that we're going to have them in our hands on Tuesday morning coming. So they're all ready and being shipped this week. So we're delighted.
Looking forward to it.
They just go on Facebook, it's all over Facebook. But people who want to order it now and we'll pre-ship them. We'll ship them. We'll sell them now, and people can get them right in time for Christmas.
Con, the tour kicks off on the 22nd of November at the Astor Theatre in Liverpool, here in Halifax at the Cone on the 23rd, and then you've got all kinds of dates, and you wrap up in Clarenville on the 22nd, just before Christmas. Just before Christmas,
we finish off in Newfoundland, and just go to our website and just check out the dates. It's kind of, we go into the Maritimes, we're into Ontario, and we do all of Newfoundland and Labrador, so it's an extensive run, and we just love it. We can't wait to get at it. Con, I appreciate your time, sir, and best of luck. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it very, very much. That is Con O'Brien, longtime frontman of the Irish Descendants. 35 years they've been together as a group. Obviously, different parts interchanging in, but the group itself has been going strong for 35 years. Did you see them down at the Lower Deck in the old days? I know many people have told me stories about those shows and the scene during that as he called it, the Celtic Wave, when it hit here in the 90s. And boy, there's some stories. I imagine Con has some stories to tell as well about those early days down there at the Lower Deck and doing the pub tour across the Maritimes as the Celtic music started to take off. If you want to get a ticket to this, theIrishDescendants.com is the website. Again, the tour kicks off on the 22nd of November. It is here at the Rebecca Cone on the 23rd. The box set is dropping on Tuesday. And I think if you are, like Todd is, a purveyor of vinyls, is that what we call them now? We used to call them records. A purveyor of records and are looking for something to perhaps add to your collection, that box set, 3-album box set of the Irish Descendants, is probably going to be on a lot of Christmas lists this December. We're going to stop down. We're going to take another break. When we come back, changing salt water to fresh water using old tires? We'll find out about this research project that's underway at Dalhousie University on the Northwest Arm when Mita Dasog joins us from Dal. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We are back in minutes.
Thanks.
Welcome back. Dan Alstrand here. This is the Todd Veinotte Show on a Wednesday morning. You might have seen these recently floating along in the Northwest Arm. They look like little white domes. And, of course, when there's things floating in the water, people start to ask questions about what they're about. Well, the whole thing is part of a research project that's underway at two Dalhousie University researchers. And this is a project to try and convert or change salt water to fresh water, and we know that with water scarcity being a thing around the world in many, many jurisdictions, looking for a cheap, easy, and energy-efficient way to desalinate water is something that is been thought about and talked about for some time, and some pretty cool research happening right here in our backyard to try and make that a reality. Very pleased to welcome to our program Associate Professor at Dalhousie, Mita Dasog. Mita, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Dan.
Oh, I appreciate your time. Mita, tell me a little bit about the genesis of this. What made you decide to pursue this?
So our research group had been working on these class of materials called plasmonic nanoparticles, and what we found out is these are very good at taking light and converting that light into heat. So we started wondering how can we take advantage of this property, and one challenge that really was close to my heart was water scarcity and water purification. So we thought, why not use sunlight as our source of energy and convert that into heat to boil water and essentially basically convert salt water into fresh potable water.
So, and forgive me, I'm certainly not a chemist, but this is essentially a great big, or not it's even big. It's a dome that heats water up enough to boil it to get the salt out of it.
Exactly. So you wouldn't see as vigorous boiling as you would see in a pot of water, and that's a specialty of these materials that we make in our lab, is that the heat is very localized. So all you will see is just condensation occurring on the dome, and that condensed water is then collected in this collection bag that can be used for drinking purposes.
Now, for one of the reasons why this process isn't widely used across the world is that normally desalinating water is super energy intensive, but this isn't.
Yes, that is correct. So currently, RO system, reverse osmosis, is one of the more popular way of converting salt water into fresh water, and it is very energy intensive. So what we wanted to do was come up with a solution that was a little bit more cost effective, a little bit more modular, so you wouldn't need to have big plants in place where you would need a lot of energy to be able to do this. So we wanted to be able to help people in remote areas, in low-income communities, transient communities, and that's what this technology helps to do. It's because it's portable, it can be deployed anywhere, and it just uses sunlight as the source of energy. And
it's partially constructed out of recycled tires.
Yes, that is correct.
How do you do that? Is that for part of the flotation device, or what are the tires used for?
So it is the actual material that is involved in absorbing the light and converting into heat. So we use something called titanium carbide. So it's made of titanium metal and carbon. So the carbon in there comes from the recycled tires.
That's fascinating. We're using something that's waste, thrown into a landfill usually, and now we're gonna hopefully provide fresh water to people because of it.
Yes, that's the hope, and we will be doing some community testing this coming summer, and we are very excited for that.
Now, these domes don't look like they're very big. How big are they?
So these are, I guess, sort of a bigger scale we have been able to make. So they are not as big as we would like to be, but it's still big enough to supply enough water for one person's consumption in a day. So it is less than, perhaps it's about 3 feet wide. So
yeah, like they're there, and I would imagine that you can float many of these in any kind of body of water, right?
Exactly.
How long does it take? How long does the process take from start to finish to go from salt water to drinkable water?
So it's pretty much immediate. So it depends on the evaporation rate and how much water you would want to collect. So, in Halifax, we are a little bit more north. So in an entire day, we collect roughly 3.5 to 4 liters of water in a day. But if you're somewhere very sunny, closer to equator in Asia or, Middle East, that's a little bit faster. So we might be able to collect almost twice as much water there.
How does it deal with rough surfaces and waves?
So we did do some testing in the harbor this past summer, and it seems to be pretty fine. And that went into the design considerations. So the foam on which everything is placed on, so it's a little bit flexible, so it can then ride those waves without crashing or falling apart. So it's pretty stable.
You've done some testing here in Halifax in the harbor and in the Northwest Arm. What's the next step? Where do you test it next?
So right now we are working with or in conversation with a couple of nonprofit organizations, and our hope is to be able to test these in low-income and transient communities in Asia this next year.
My goodness. And when would be able to see this? Would this be a commercial thing, or would this be handled by nonprofits, or what's the end game for this?
Currently, we are hoping to work with more of the nonprofit organizations because of the target community. But depending on how we work and if it is sort of commercially feasible, then we would consider it going down the commercial route as well.
I could see, a sailboat dragging this behind it when it's out sailing instead of having a reverse osmosis system drawing all that power on a sailing vessel, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is of interest also for people who camp, who like to go backcountry camping. So this could be used for that purpose as well.
Mita, I appreciate your time. Keep us in the loop as your research continues, okay?
For sure. Thank you so much for having me again.
That is Mita Dasog. She is Associate Professor of Chemistry at Dalhousie University. It's this kind of thing. It's this kind of thinking that's going to solve our problems. I know we talk about outside-the-box thinking all the time, and this kind of just grassroots, hey, this works, why don't we try this, is how we are going to... Can you imagine if we come up with a cheap, energy-efficient way to desalinate ocean water? Game changer for the planet, right? Discovered it right here, Dalhousie University. Getting ready to take our next break. Of course, don't forget, after the news here at 11 o'clock, we will open up the telephone lines. It's time for house calls. Dr. John Gillis will be joining us to discuss or to answer your questions, I guess. If you have a medical-related question, if you've been something's bugging you, something has been bothering you, or maybe you got a diagnosis, or so on and so forth that you'd like a second opinion on, Dr. John will be here for the next hour to do just that. It's not easy these days for most to get in front of a doctor, and we get to do it here, and it's free. And don't forget the open hour, the Mid-Week Meltdown, will happen at 12 o'clock today. There's an awful lot to talk about. The ongoing Tim Hortons coffee scandal in Lunenburg County. You heard this yesterday that the Liberal Party has issued asked for an investigation after it was learned of a PC candidate staffer handing out coffee cards and the candidate themselves standing at the end of the drive-through line. The Liberals contend that has broken or is breaking an election law. Elections Nova Scotia is investigating. Today we hear that the Liberals have stepped up that and have the PC staffer, by the way, announced his resignation yesterday. Now the Liberals are suggesting that the candidate, Susan Corkum-Greek, should step down as well over this. It is the ongoing genesis of a political scandal, right? And we'll open up the telephone lines for you to comment on that. Also, an interesting development, maybe, in the inner workings and the inner circles of the Liberal Party. We played it off the top of the show. We'll play it again before the open hour. Scott Bryson, former federal MP, maybe cracking the door open a little bit with some ambition to return to politics, perhaps, as the next Liberal leader in Nova Scotia. We'll play that clip for you just after the news at 12 and get your thoughts on it. And I'm most curious as to your thoughts about the power outages last night. Seems like when we get wind in Nova Scotia, we lose power. It happens all the time. What do we do with Nova Scotia Power? All those questions coming up at 12 o'clock today when we open up the telephone lines. But before that, we're going to stop down and take a break and welcome Dr. John Gillis. House Calls is next. The telephone number is 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. If you have a medical condition, diagnosis, or you just want to ask the doctor's opinion on something, this is your opportunity. Again, 902-405-6000, House Calls, after the news.
Facts.
Dr. John, Dr. John, you're my medicine man. Dr. John, you're my medicine man.
I don't use no potion, I don't use no pill. Just give me a little loving care, I can cure your ills.
All right, it's Wednesday, just after the news at 11, and that means it's time for House Calls. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. The telephone lines are wide open if you have a question for Dr. Gillis. This is a great opportunity for you to get in and get in the queue so that you're not disappointed. Again, that telephone number is 902-405-6000. We're just waiting for Dr. Gillis to connect up here as we carry on through another Wednesday here on the Todd Veinotte Show. The wind hasn't let up. It's still blowing out there, isn't it? It's interesting that we get a windy day like this and everybody is just complaining about it. It's wild. Anyway, we'll talk about the weather and the wind and Nova Scotia Power when we open up the telephone lines for the Midweek Meltdown. Of course, that happening in the next hour. Welcome to the program. For House Calls, Dr. John Gillis. Dr. John, how are you, sir? John, are you there? All right, I'm going to stick you back on hold, John, and let Vanessa work her magic and see what is the issue with what's going on with that. Again, 902-405-6000. We'll get to Dr. John here in a minute once we figure out what's going on with the technology, because it's a wonderful thing, isn't it? We're just working away here. Vanessa's trying to get the right buttons pushed. All right, let's try this again. Hello, are you there, Dr. John?
I sure am. How we doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Leafs didn't look very good last night.
Oh, they look terrible.
It's
up and down.
It's interesting, right? You know, we have they go on a couple game winning streak, and everybody's like, Austin Matthews, who, right? And then now it's like, when's he coming back?
It's frustrating to watch, but what else is new, eh?
Right, and I don't think we talked about your beloved New Orleans Saints changing some leadership on the sideline. Your thoughts on the new coach there?
Well, it seems to have brought at least a little spark back. I mean, they beat the Falcons, but it's been a rough year to say the least.
902-405-6000. Let's get right to the questions, Dr. John. We'll make sure you're locked in so we don't lose you, and we welcome Bill to the program. Bill, how are you?
Not too bad, sir. Not too bad.
Your question for Dr. John, please.
Yeah, for the doctor, I had to wait 6 months to get a CAT scan, X-ray tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. And what I'm wondering is, wasn't necessarily what I went in for, but I did have cancer, went to my back, took my prostate out, and my cancer went to my back. So I was wondering if you know, does CAT scan detect cancer?
Well, the short answer is they can, but it depends what it's being done for. What are you having a CAT scan for tomorrow? What's that for?
Well, my back's been bothering me quite a bit. It's kind of a strange situation. I can go dancing for hours, not an ache or pain, but then other than that, my back bothers me. So I'm in to check to see what's wrong.
And you said the cancer spread to your back. You mean it get into your spine? Is that what you mean?
I don't know if it got to my spine. I never really determined where it got. Never really asked the question actually where it went to, but they took out my prostate and then the cancer, and I take this treatment an injection every 3 months there, testosterone. It cuts that out. So I don't know if this will detect the cancer or not. I was wondering. It wasn't what I was going in for, just basically to check it out.
Depends what they're looking for. I mean, if it's a scan of the spine, we sometimes will see, tumors that have spread to the spine. Sometimes we'll see other stuff, even though that's not what we're looking for. If they're doing a scan, of the pelvis to look for other things, they would often give you contrast or dye, which is a different protocol than. Again, it really depends on what it's been ordered for and what they're looking for. So the short answer to your question is yes, it can detect cancers, but it's not always reliable to check things if that's not what someone is looking for, if that makes sense.
Thanks for the call, Bill. Appreciate it. Best of luck with your scan. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Dr. John, Bill mentioning that the cancer had taken out his prostate. It is November. It is that time of year where we highlight prostate cancer awareness with Movember and those kind of things. Your thoughts on getting checked and what should we be doing after we turn 50?
Yeah, it remains an issue. I think it's gotten better, but men in particular are often stubborn about getting screened. The general recommendation is after 50, get a blood test, usually yearly, and an exam every 2 years, unless you have a strong family history or symptoms. I mean, those recommendations, have changed a bit over the years, but that's sort of the general rule of thumb that we follow now. If you have a strong family history, you might get checked more often. But the bottom line is You should still do both. I think people got kind of comfortable with just the blood test for a while, and it is fairly effective. And, nobody really wants to have a finger stuck up their arse, but the recommendations are still to do both, and it's important to be as vigilant as we can, because even though it is a slow-growing cancer typically, it can still cause long-term problems.
And it's always better to catch things early rather than later, right?
Exactly.
902-405-6000 is the number, 902-405-6000. Let's welcome Gloria to the program. Gloria, how are you?
Thank you, Dan. I'm fine. Hi, Dr. John. Dr. John, my first comment is we should have cloned Dr. Bill. We need more honest, caring politicians. But my question, Dr. John, is I'm trying to find out about RSV. My doctor said she thinks it's good for 2 years. I had it last year. She said, ask your pharmacist. My pharmacist thinks it's good forever. So what is your feeling on it?
So going to the internet, it says 2 years. Yeah, I'm just on the Center for Disease Control website, and it says 2 years. So that seems to be correct. And it does. It's an expensive vaccine for only 2 years of protection.
It is, but it's worth it.
It's quite expensive. We're seeing some nasty RSV around, and as you may know, it used to be something we only saw in kids.
Yes.
We're seeing a lot more of it in adults, particularly older adults, and it is worth getting, but it is concerning certainly for some seniors on fixed incomes who don't have the coverage for it or can't afford it.
Yeah. I'm free this year. So
fair enough.
I had it last year.
There you go.
Thanks, Gloria.
Anyway, thanks very much.
902-405-6000. 902-405-6000. Boy, you got Bill and Gloria right off the top, John. You're doing well in the 90 demographic today.
There we go.
That RSV brings me to an email question that we got, Dr. John, very quickly before we go to our first break, and it has to do with one of the campaign promises that people have heard during this campaign, and it's a universal shingles vaccine. I think it was the PCs that have promised that they'll bring that in. What are shingles? What are the symptoms, and what are the treatments for it?
Yeah, so shingles is a viral illness, that is mostly known to cause a rash, often on the chest or torso, but it can be elsewhere, or it can get into the eyes. The rotten part about shingles is, for most people, it's minor and it goes away, but some people, it can be quite serious in that it comes back and causes a very serious chronic pain condition, and one that's very hard to treat. So the vaccine's been around forever. There was an older version that didn't work as well. The newer one, Shingrix, I think, has been around for at least 10 years. It's 2 doses. It is expensive. And look, we've talked about this on the program before. This is what often happens with these vaccines. They come in, they get sort of road tested to see if they work. They get covered by private plans, but not government for a while. And at some point, a balance of cost, demand, and efficacy comes through. And whether for purely scientific reasons or political reasons or both, they often tend to get covered. So, this is a good vaccine. It's important to cover it. The vaccine, particularly with 2 doses, is highly effective at preventing it. It's something that can come back even if you've had it before. And again, people can get quite ill from it. So, this is generally a good idea, to protect people from this. And again, something we've recommended for some time. And I don't know if the cost has come down or not, but it is an important vaccine to get. So, this is, on balance, a good thing.
I've never had shingles, Dr. John, but I had chickenpox. Does that create immunity for it?
Yeah, they're related, cause sort of by the same virus, but the short answer is not really. Not really. You can still get shingles if you've had chickenpox.
Is it as contagious as chickenpox is?
Not typically. Not typically in that, you don't see it, in widespread, going around schools and that sort of thing. But, it can be much more, damaging long term.
And it's painful, right?
Yeah, it can be very painful. I mean, again, someone who's had chickenpox can get shingles. You can get shingles and get shingles again. And for some people, again, it's mild. Their rash comes and goes, but it's these people who have this, the severe, the severe reaction and get this chronic pain condition, which is really tough.
902-405-6000 is the telephone number. We're going to take our first break. You're listening to House Calls. He's Dr. John Gillis, and we're back in minutes. Welcome back to House Calls. He's Dr. John Gillis, here to answer your questions. Should you have a medical issue you'd like to bring up with the good doctor, here's your opportunity. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Dr. John, we'll go right to the phones and welcome Alexis to the program. Alexis, how are you?
Oh, I'm well. Thanks for taking my call.
Your question for Dr. Gillis, please.
Dr. John, I have a question about spinal stenosis. My husband is actually traveling in the UK and has been having some problems. Been diagnosed with bladder stones, kidney stones, and spinal stenosis. So the first part of the question is there a correlation with bladder and spinal stenosis? And are pain medications, I'm really afraid of addictive medications that he would be diagnosed. Is it pain pills or injections that you get for such a condition?
So I think you said kidney stones and bladder stones. Any damage to the spine, whether narrowing, nerve compression or such, can affect your bladder's function. It can affect people's ability to urinate, but it doesn't cause, that type of thing doesn't cause bladder stones. Bladder stones are actually quite rare because usually by the time a stone gets down to the bladder, it's left the kidney, travel down, and then just gets sent out. You pee it out. So I'm not sure what that's about. Okay. Spinal stenosis is a narrowing of the spinal column, which can put pressure or on the spinal cord itself or on the nerve roots, and that can cause pain. So we're mixing a couple conditions here. I mean, the treatment for kidney stones is to pass them. Right. Sometimes people can't because they're too big and they need to be, blown up or pulled out. But the treatment is to get rid of them. And sometimes people need pain meds while that's happening. Spinal stenosis is a condition, if it's mild, can usually be managed with different types of medications, including drugs for nerve pain. Sometimes opiate painkillers are required. Injections can help, but again, it depends on, what level we're talking about and, how bad it is. And then sometimes surgery is required for spinal stenosis. But you're describing kind of a lot going on there. It sort of depends on the how and the what and the why, a few different factors.
So to arrive at what stage of spinal stenosis, that involves a CAT scan or an MRI?
Well, usually you won't say you can't, but it's very difficult to diagnose spinal stenosis without a CAT scan or an MRI. I'm not sure how they would have done that without.
They actually did. He did have that. Yeah, that was done. And okay, I just wanted to know about if there was a correlation and to try to stay away from any kind of pain meds that may be terribly addictive, because those type of pills really scare me.
Well, what I always say to people, you should be cautious, and you shouldn't take those such things without researching, without understanding. But I also see a lot of people who they won't take stuff when they should when they're in intractable pain. So there's a balance there, and just try to find that, right? Remembering that you may not be the one in pain.
Thanks for the call, Alexis. Appreciate it. Best of luck. 902-405-6000. 902-405-6000. The telephone line's wide open. If you have a question for Dr. John, here's a great opportunity. Again, 902-405-6000 is the number. Dr. John, an email question we got today from Meg. It says, if you have time, can you ask Dr. John about eye twitching? She says, my eye's been twitching nonstop for about a month. I've got no other symptoms, but I've been under a bit of stress lately. Is this something to be concerned about?
Yeah, so the short answer is it's hard to know. Usually this is benign. Usually it's from things like stress, alcohol, caffeine, lack of sleep, eye strain. If your eyes have changed or you're doing a lot more computer work or something different, it can cause it. And it's often more associated with cold weather, and it's more common in women. It's a fancy name for it, ocular myokymia, myokymia. But generally, if you're having symptoms like this, especially for a period of time, it is probably worth getting looked at just to make sure it's not something more serious, which it is much less likely to be. But it is worth getting a look and, to rule out anything more serious, and then to determine if any of those sort of more common lifestyle things, for lack of a better word, might help.
I can imagine that would be quite debilitating if your eye's twitching all the time.
Yeah. And we see it from time to time in the ER. Most of the time it's benign. Every now and again it's something a little more serious. So it is important to rule those things out.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. One more email question, then we'll get back to the phones. And I'm probably going to mispronounce this, Dr. John. It says here, hello, can you ask Dr. John about rosacea? Rosacea. Rosacea, that's what it is. And I've been diagnosed with this recently. What are my options?
Yeah, rosacea is basically a condition that causes people's faces to be red and flushed, often the nose, but it can be elsewhere. For some people, it's triggered by environment, but it can be triggered by all those things we talked about a minute ago: heat, stress, alcohol, spicy foods. The treatment, for some people is just avoiding those things. For some people, it's topical antibiotics, metronidazole. For some people, they need oral antibiotics. So there is a range of things you can do. The first bit is to try and figure out if there's a trigger that can be eliminated to get rid of the bloody thing.
Painful?
Not typically. No, it's just annoying and can be, a feeling of warmth and irritation, but not typically painful.
902-405-6000 is the telephone number. Dr. John's here for the next 30 minutes after the news to answer your questions. Lots of lines open if you want to get on. Again, 902-405-6000. We're back after the break. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. It's House Calls. He's Dr. John Gillis. He's here to answer your medical questions. If you have something that's bothering you, something that you have been diagnosed with and like a second opinion, or just want to gauge Dr. John's thoughts on something medical related, this is your opportunity. Number of open lines available to you. The number is 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. We begin on the phone with Philip. Philip, how are you?
Not too bad, thank you. I got a question for the doctor, please.
Sure. Go ahead.
Dr. Gillis, my question is to do with muscle spasms, which I believe I have. I'll just give you a quick history. Late last September, I experienced a pain on the top of my right foot, and I thought it was maybe just a tendon. A few days later, it went away. That's fine. So then a few days after that, I started to get this pain up my right leg, and it goes from the back of my calf to my kneecap type thing, and and then it spread to my left leg, and the left leg is fine now. That seemed to have cured itself within a 10-day period, but my right foot is still affected by it, and it prevents me from basically walking any distance at all. So I'm just wondering, I've already had two doctors at the ER. They looked at it, and they had no explanation for it. But I'm just wondering what type of, where my foot is still swollen a bit and my leg is still much the same. What would my best course of action be?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities there. I mean, you could have, if someone looked at you, they probably didn't think you had a clot. If the pain gets worse when you exert yourself, it could be a circulation problem. You could have an arterial flow problem, and there's a test for that called a Doppler ultrasound. But an arterial Doppler as opposed to a venous Doppler, which is what we use to look for clots. You could have nerve damage. You could just be having something as simple as muscle spasm from dehydration or what have you. It would seem unusual to be that side only. So it sounds to me like the next step for you is some testing, some investigations. And have you started that process with anybody, either the hospital or
no?
I've
talked to I've talked to my family doctor, and I brought it to his attention there, and he seemed a little bit bewildered about it as well. Whereas the left leg fixed itself right up, but the right leg it's not as bad as it originally was, where it was almost like a broken ankle when you try to walk. But it's still there, and I've been using Voltaren on it. That I don't know if that helps any or not, but I'm just wondering, do you think I should, is there like a physio type of therapist or something I could go see from there here, or what?
Yeah, from what you're describing to me there, I don't think physio is going to help that. I think you probably need some, additional testing to check some of those things I mentioned, nerves, circulation, and such.
Thanks, Philip. Appreciate the call. Best of luck. 902-405-6000 is the number. Dr. John, got a couple of emails from listeners asking about collaborative care. There's been some discussion during this election campaign about creating more of these collaborative care clinics in an effort to alleviate the ER, which I know you're intimately familiar with. What's your thoughts on these collaborative care models with doctors and nurse practitioners and everybody kind of working in the same spot?
So the general concept of collaborative care is a good one, meaning if you have different people doing different things with perhaps different skill sets, you can help people, get what they need. They may need to see a doctor, they may need to see a nurse, they may need to, see a physiotherapist, for some treatment of a musculoskeletal thing that doesn't require a nurse practitioner or a physician. So from that point of view, it's a very good idea. And I've had a lot of talks with people about this. A couple things have happened in the last number of years to try and understand why our lists have exploded. This is a bit of a simplification, but I think there's two main reasons for it. The workforce has changed. It's younger, more balanced, more diverse, which is a wonderful thing. But we don't have people working 65 hours a week carrying 5,000 patients in a practice anymore. That's a good thing. That wasn't doing the profession any favors, and we needed to change from that. But the problem is we didn't plan that. So what's happened is you have newer physicians who aren't working these hours. They're living balanced lives, and they're taking on fewer patients. So our ability to serve even the same population with the same number of doctors has declined. The other thing that's happened, and I think this comes back to collaborative care, is as we've moved away from fee-for-service, which is an incentive to work, to get paid for the work you do, per patient, per operation, that sort of thing. To varying degrees, in different jurisdictions, we forgot to think about accountability for productivity. So if I'm seeing 50 patients a day, and you put me on a salary, and nobody gives me any rules for how many people I have to see, human nature is such that people will slow down. They'll see fewer people. Now, again, in some cases, that's a good thing because the person getting through the door is likely going to get more time spent with them and have a better experience. However, if you're cutting that productivity by 40%, people aren't getting through the door. So we've seen the double whammy of a change in the demographic of the workforce and a change towards more salaried models where the accountability for performance is taken away. And I'm not suggesting we should go hell-bent back to fee-for-service or hell-bent back to people working too many hours. We shouldn't. But we need to be accountable for planning the workforce, and we also need to be accountable for, whether it's an incentivized model. Ontario has some decent combos where you get a base rate, but you get an additional bonus if you see more people or take on more people. There are ways to balance these factors, and unfortunately, and to no one government's fault, this wasn't seen coming, but here we are. So to answer your question, I like collaborative care, but it has to be mixed with a lens of accountability for making sure that people get seen in a timely manner, and that people are working a fair amount and a sustainable amount for the salary or package that they're getting.
Is it possible, Dr. John, that if we get the balance rate that you were just discussing there, that we can deal with the backlog of patients with the number of doctors that we have already in Nova Scotia, or are we still in a physician deficit?
Well, it depends who you talk to about that. There are people who think that our total number is fine. We're just not deploying them in the right way, or providing the incentives to get an acceptable level of productivity. And I think that's a conversation we need to have. And again, we don't need to go back to the burnt out rural family doctors working 75 hours a week. That's not the right thing to do. And nor do we have to go back and make it all about money and just have people churning people through to make dollars. That's not what we want either. But there has to be a mix of accountability for the supply in the workforce and what they're actually doing.
The telephone number is 902-405-6000. Let's go to the lines. We welcome Ed to the show. Ed, how are you?
Good. How are you today?
Good. Your question, please.
I have a question for Dr. John there. He was talking about the shingles. They're expensive. Do you have any idea how much it costs?
I'd be guessing, and there's probably someone out there who has done it recently. I think it's around $160, and you got to get 2 of them. But I'll see if the internet will tell me. But there's probably someone out there who knows.
Yeah, that's not actually half bad. Would the MSI or Pharmacare cover any of that? Do you know that?
Well, I think that's the idea. Is to this point they have not, and there has been talk of that changing, through the election. So, this is one of the conversations that's being had, and what should we pay for, and when should we pay for it?
Right on. Yeah. Okay. Now, my girlfriend, she was 77 there, and she has Blue Cross. I wonder if that would cover that.
Private insurance often does. Every plan is different, with, different restrictions and such, but it's definitely worth checking with the insurance, and often the pharmacy can check that for you.
Right on. And would you suggest that probably she should get the two shots at her age?
Yeah, I suggest it to almost anybody. Unless you're allergic to it or what have you, there's really no reason not to, because it's very effective in preventing people from getting shingles.
Ed, appreciate the call, sir. Have a good one. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. A few lines available if you want to get your question in before the top of the hour. We need to take another break. You're listening to House Calls. He's Dr. John Gillis. I'm Dan Alstrand. We are back in minutes.
Thanks.
Welcome back. This is House Calls. He's Dr. John Gillis. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. During the break, Dr. John, a couple of people reached out to us and said that you're pretty close on the shingles vaccines, about $150 for each shot.
Yeah, which, again, to some people is no big deal, or they have insurance, but for some people, that is a significant amount of money, and, we do need to be sensitive to that, and, hope people can get the coverage they need.
Let's go back to the phone lines. We welcome Larry to the program. Larry, how are you?
it's a question for the doctor.
Larry, are you there?
Hello, yes I am.
Your question for Dr. John, please.
Hello.
Larry, you sound like you're 100 miles away. I'm going to put you on hold and see if we can clear that up before we get to the question. 902-405-6000 is the number, 902-405-6000. I'm going to try Larry again. Larry, how are you?
Hello.
Larry, are you there? We lost Larry. It's one of those cell phone dead zones. Again, 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Dr. John, we didn't ask you like we normally do off the top. I know that Gloria had touched on RSV, but how's the COVID situation look in the ER these days? Is it gaining strength? Is it staying stable? Is it weaning? What's going on?
It's hard to tell, what you're dealing with. Again, whether it's RSV, COVID, flu, or some other virus, it's still strong. The ERs have been quite busy. I had one shift a couple of weeks ago where, for the first time in years, felt like I wasn't run off my feet. But for the most part, it's remained quite busy and brisk, and hopefully we can stay ahead of it.
It's that perfect time of year, right? This is that cold and flu season when everything kind of kicks in.
No, absolutely. And, people are inside more, and, we will see spikes. Just the question is, how bad are they going to be?
We also are hearing stories about an outbreak of measles. I know you and I talked about this last week briefly, Dr. John. That outbreak is still ongoing in New Brunswick. Have we seen or have you seen anything here or heard of anything here?
No, haven't seen much. That doesn't mean it's not here yet. We don't tend to see that reporting until it gets a little bit bigger, and it may well happen. It seems to have occurred a few times in New Brunswick, and I don't know if that's because there's a specific group of people there that did not keep up with the immunizations or what have you. But I guess we will see.
902-405-6000 is the telephone number, and Vanessa's just getting a few people into the system here for us, Dr. John, before we run out of time. Don't forget, Dr. John here just to the top of the hour, so if you want to get your question in, here's a great opportunity, just like Scott's going to do. Scott, how are you?
Hey, good morning, Dr. Gillis.
Your question,
good
please.
day.
Hey, how are you?
Your question, please.
I have COPD.
Okay.
And I seem to be falling, waking up at night, and I don't know why. And the last time I fell, I ended up with dislocated finger, and that's still swollen. That's been 4 weeks. Just wondering, should I be going back to the doctor, or what should I do?
Yes, sir. What was the first thing you said you have? COPD?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, which is a lung disorder. I'm not sure how that would cause you to fall, unless your breathing is so bad that it's affecting you. If you're consistently falling and you don't know why, that needs to be worked up. There's a whole host of reasons, from blood pressure meds being off to dehydration to cardiac irregularities. There's a whole list of things. So yeah, you should probably revisit that.
Yeah, I just find that waking up, I seem to be have to wake up throughout the night 4, 5, 6 times a night, urinating, the sweats, the night sweats and stuff. They just don't stop. Like they continue to go. It's mild, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, if you're peeing more at night, that could be signs of an infection. Night sweats aren't good, so you probably need another look, either from your own doc or from the hospital if you're not getting to the bottom of that. That's not normal.
Scott, best of luck. Appreciate the call. 902-405-6000. Let's try Larry again and see if we can get Larry on the phone. Larry, how are you?
Very good.
There you are. Well, your question for Dr. Gillis, please.
Yes, Dr. Gillis. I'm calling for some information for my partner. She suffers from Parkinson's, and her prescription has run out for a medication. She has no family doctor. Her neurologist has retired. So we're just kind of wondering what the next course would be of action to get her some medication. She had been on a wait list for a neurologist now for 2 years, and she just come to find out that the neurologist she was waiting for is about to retire. So we're kind of up against the wall here.
Yeah, so I mean, your options are probably the online service Maple, which is available free of charge for people that don't have a family doctor. You can probably, do that yourself or get someone to help you sign up for it. It does require a bit of a tech hand, but lots of people out there can help you with it. Option B would be a walk-in clinic, and unfortunately, and option C would probably be spending some time waiting at the ER. But I think Maple, the online service, would be your quickest bet.
Okay, like we were told that she had to have a neurologist to prescribe this medication for her.
And who told you that?
It was a neurologist that she had before, the one that had retired.
You don't happen to know what the medication is, do you?
My goodness, no, it just escapes me.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that most people wouldn't be able to prescribe as long as it was a previous documented history of its stable use. The other thing that I forgot to mention, which might at least buy you some time, is asking your pharmacist to extend the medication for you, which they're able to do for most medications for as long as they're able to. Have you tried that yet?
No, we haven't tried that at all.
So you may want to give that a go as well.
Larry, appreciate it. Best of luck, sir. Dr. John, we're fresh out of time. I appreciate yours, and we'll talk to you next week.
Always a pleasure. Take care.
That
Bye-bye.
is Dr. John Gillis here on Wednesdays from 11 until noon to answer your medical-related questions. We are going to stop for the news here at the top of the hour, and on the other side of it, it's time for the Midweek Meltdown. There is an awful lot to talk about these days with the election campaign that is ongoing, the unfolding coffee scandal, some perhaps indications of some fractures within the Liberal Party itself here in Nova Scotia. And I'm curious of your thoughts about Nova Scotia Power after last night's windstorm, I put quotations around that, knocked out power to thousands of people here on the peninsula and over in Dartmouth. What do we do with Nova Scotia Power? There's been talk about power rates during the election campaign, not a lot of talk about resiliency. Where did the push go from elections from a bygone era where we were talking about breaking the monopoly of Nova Scotia Power? Are we stuck with it? What do we do with Nova Scotia Power, and how do we keep the lights on? Just some of the questions you might want to tackle when we throw open those telephone lines after the news at the top of the hour. The telephone number, as it is during all of these open hours, 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. The Midweek Meltdown is next.
Thanks.
Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Good afternoon. I'm Dan Allstrand. It's time now for the Midweek Meltdown. The telephone lines are open this hour, dedicated to you, your chance to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. I threw out a couple of questions out there. The ongoing, if we can call it a scandal, between the PCs and the Liberals. PC candidate in Lunenburg standing at the end of a drive-thru while a staffer was handing out Tim Hortons coffee cards. And then the candidate, PC candidate, was waving at the people, asking for their support at the other end. The Liberals have sent a complaint, an official complaint to Elections Nova Scotia, saying that that violates the Elections Act. That it's a vote buying scheme. The staffer in Lunenburg that was involved in this has resigned yesterday. The Liberals saying that's not good enough, and that the candidate in that riding should step down from that. Is this a made in Nova Scotia scandal? As political scandals go, it's very Nova Scotian when we're talking about free coffees and buying votes with coffees. Anyway, interested in your thoughts on this, or is this just what we've become with election campaigns as we roll along? I did get a release from the PCs earlier today, maybe raising some questions about internal struggle, maybe, within the Liberal Party. Now, I will preface this by saying that this was sent to me by the PCs, so, there's politics that's playing involved in this. But what at the center of this release was in making an endorsement for the Liberal candidate, I believe it was King South, Scott Bryson, who we haven't heard from for a long time since he left his job in Ottawa as an MP and a cabinet minister in the Trudeau government, made an endorsement that has many people's eyebrows being raised in Nova Scotia. Here, listen for yourself.
Now, I'm not in public life today. I'm not in elected office. But someday when I return to politics, I will want someone like Mike Ham on my team. And I hope you elect him to be on your team as a good MLA for King South.
Does that sound like Scott Bryson is perhaps testing the waters in the aftermath of this provincial election? When I come back to politics? Interesting, isn't it? 902-405-6000 is the telephone number, 902-405-6000. And very quickly, I touched on this a couple of times during the program today, and many of you woke up this morning with no power after last night's storm blew through our region. I'm curious as to your thoughts about Nova Scotia Power. This seems to happen a lot. There's been a lot of discussion, as there should be, as of late, about rates, power rates. What we do with power rates. How do we keep them from being going through the roof? And I know that is an important issue, but what doesn't get talked about a lot, in my opinion, is the resiliency of those lines. It seems that as soon as we get a storm that comes through, it just becomes almost accepted behavior on the behalf of Nova Scotians that somebody's going to lose power. What do we do with Nova Scotia Power? There was some talk a few elections ago about breaking up the monopoly and getting somebody else in here, but that just never happened. Is that the solution? Is that how we keep the lights on? Is that we bring more competition into the market? What do we do with Nova Scotia Power? The telephone number is 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. We begin with Sean this morning. This afternoon, I guess. Sean, how are you?
I'm good, Dan. How you doing?
I'm doing okay for a Wednesday. What's on your mind?
Good. This Tim Hortons scandal.
Yeah.
I think it's actually ridiculous, and I think it's petty politics, and it's a very, very Trudeau way of why Zach Churchill gets labeled as a little Trudeau, because it essentially it's petty politics. I mean, we're talking about, so would it have been different if they went in and bought $50 worth of them big Take 10 buckets and went outside and gave everybody a cup of coffee? Like, I don't understand. I've been to a lot of political events, and there's always tea, coffee, biscuits. So is what he's saying that no more of that? Like, we can't even give a coffee or a Timbit away at a rally or whatever campaign thing? Is that really where Zach Churchill thinks he's going to win? Is by kicking out a candidate for giving away a $2 coffee? Because I'm personally, if someone is going to vote for a $2 coffee, well, you shouldn't be voting. If that's what's going to buy your vote is a $2 cup of coffee, you shouldn't be voting. So Zach is so out to lunch with his campaign platform. Look, he goes on about $12 million. Nova Scotians are going to have to foot for this bill. Well, Zach, whether we have it tomorrow or we have it in July, it's going to cost us $12 million. So right there. And then you look at, Tim Houston doubling the population. Well, if you remember back when McNeil and Rankin were in, they had an immigration policy of 30,000 people a year. Well, do the math on that. out to 2060 and see what it brings you. It brings you double the population. It's the exact same immigration policy as the Liberals had, right? And then they go on about, oh, he's not fixing healthcare. He's not fixing healthcare, and the wait times or the doctors list have doubled. Well, that's just not true. He actually stabilized the numbers of family doctors and is starting to bring it down. And furthermore, my other app works in healthcare, and you know what? She was actually happy with Tim Houston because finally she secured a contract that Zach Churchill couldn't get done as the health minister for years. And finally she got the retro pay she was deserving of. So when you talk about fixing healthcare, you guys leave out or Zach, not you guys, sorry, Dan, but Zach leaves out all these things, and his campaign is just petty. So if you're going to put that rule in and try to kick a candidate out over a $2 cup of coffee when we all know that this coffee and tea and donuts are given out at these events all the time, it's petty. If you think you're going to take a conservative voter and flip them to a liberal, you're wrong. All you're doing by this is appeasing your base. You're not expanding with a petty little scandal like this and blasting it all over the media. You need to give your head a shake and get on the campaign trail and do things for Nova Scotians. Not worry about coffee and donuts for people in the winter. Like, I don't know. Sorry, Dan. It was just a little rant.
It's all good, Sean. That's what the Midweek Meltdown's all about. Appreciate your call.
Thanks, Dan.
902-405-6000. Exactly what the Midweek Meltdown is all about. This is your chance to talk about the issues of the day, and regardless if you agree with them or not. 902-405-6000. I appreciate the passion. 902-405-6000 is the number. Let's welcome Evan to the program. Evan, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, two things. First thing is really quickly I wanted to get on my soapbox, and I've been helping out with some of the campaigns going on in the provincial election.
Okay.
And there has been a huge issue of people stealing and destroying political signs.
Isn't that awful? It happens all the time, right? And I just don't understand it.
Yeah, and like, for example, in my neighborhood, pretty much all of the signs were removed at one point, and they've all had to been replaced. So, this is one of the few opportunities where people actually get to express themselves and participate in the sort of democratic process. So I would appreciate if people would stop doing that.
Yeah, right. It's as much as election signs tend to get the hairs on the back of my neck standing up because of the way they're haphazardly spread all over the place. That being said, there's nothing illegal with doing what you all doing. So you're I don't understand if it comes from a campaign, if it's just somebody that's done with politics or whatever. But it does happen a lot.
Yeah, it's a real shame. So the second thing that I really wanted to talk about is kind of related to the mini scandal about that school that sent out a letter requesting that
in Sackville.
People attend the Remembrance Day ceremony outside without uniform.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really wanted to. I feel like the way that Tim Houston responded to this was deeply irresponsible. He kind of blasted it all over social media, saying how this is like a terrible thing. When really, I think, it was a thing done by the school with the right intention, maybe slightly misguided, but the response online really unleashed a deluge of threats and hate and intimidation to people at the school. I know, for example, there were people sharing the school's contact information all over social media. And, the scandal kind of went all the way up to Polyev. I saw, the federal conservatives, posting about this on social media. So I feel like this is something that was done in a really cynical way, and it could have just been, Houston could have reached out to the school and gotten more information and maybe suggested that they fix, which they actually did, retract it and kind of clarify their position. But I just think that it's really irresponsible for a premier to sort of unleash that kind of vitriol towards a school administration that's really just trying to kind of do something out of kindness and respect and not out of anything malicious.
Well, I don't know if many will agree that it's out of kindness and respect, but I will respect your opinion, Evan. I appreciate it.
All right.
902-405-6000. I don't know if that was what the genesis of that letter home in the bulletin to ask vets and serving members not to wear their uniform, if it was out of kindness and respect. I don't know about that. I wasn't in the room. Don't know what the decision-making process was on it. But at the end of the day, I think, was there an opportunity there to score political points? Yeah. But that being said, when we see something that we don't agree with, then we should probably call it out, right? It's kind of the way that it should work. Did they do it with political motivation behind it? Probably. But at the end of the day, it got changed, right? My thoughts. Going to stop down, take a break. The Midweek Meltdown continues on the other side of it. 902-405-6000 is the telephone number. There are a few lines. Your chance to talk about whatever it is on your mind. We're back in minutes. Welcome back. Sorry, we're just watching the TV feeds here. They have a live shot of Donald Trump in the White House with Joe Biden, and they've got the fire going in the background. And Vanessa popped into my ear and said they should be playing Christmas music. Isn't it just all warm and fuzzy? It's one of those stage political things, where you kind of sit there and like Donald's smiling with his Donald smile, and Joe's smiling, and they're just like, okay, take our pictures. Let's get this over with. I want to get on to the business. Right? Anyway, love to be a fly on the wall of the Oval Office once that's over with, right? 902-405-6000. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dan, how you doing today?
Well, it's Wednesday. I'm doing pretty good.
Oh, yeah, halfway there.
You are?
So there's a big difference between choosing to go to a campaign rally where you know that there's going to be a political leader there, a candidate, because you're making that choice to go there. If you make the choice to go to Tim Hortons to buy a coffee and suddenly there's someone else buying your coffee for you, that's not expected. So they're basically, it's different, right? It's canvassing, but with money, which is illegal. There's a difference. So people making that kind of comparison is, campaign rallies and they give out coffee and Timbits all the time, that's different. Because you're going there knowing specifically what is going to happen there, as opposed to simply having somebody out of nowhere say, oh, look, here's a free coffee. All that aside.
Yep.
I went home last night and I ran some numbers. And what I found out, let's talk about the doctor wait list is one of the things that people say, oh, look what Tim Houston has done. I found it kind of interesting in going through the numbers of the different provinces that actually publish the list for people waiting for a family doctor. All the provinces that publish this list and have over the last 3 to 4 months, they've all dropped by the roughly same percentage. I don't know how that could be, because not everywhere is going to attract the equal amount of healthcare workers. So how is it that all these different provinces have seen the same amount of drop in terms of percentage over the same period of time? We haven't had a mass deportation of people, so there's no less demand. We haven't had a mass ingress of doctors and healthcare workers. So when one of the opposition parties earlier this year questioned how they came up with this new number, this lower number, I get it. I kind of like to know how they got that number as well. In addition to that, as I made a point yesterday, over the last 2 or 3 years, they've been $150 million surplus budget on this province every year. Since 2021, Nova Scotia's debt has increased by $2.4 billion. Now, I need someone to explain this one to me. How is it possible that a conservative government has budget surpluses and still manages to put our province almost $2.5 billion into debt in the 3 years that he's been in power? And more importantly, how does anybody see all of this? See that he's failed to keep a single promise from the last election and believe him when he says all these new things are going to happen if he's elected again?
Ryan, the one thing I'll take exception was that you said that our province is $2.5 billion in debt and that the Premier put us there. I will suggest that debt has been accumulating over many governments.
Oh, absolutely. But right now, the provincial debt's almost $20 billion. It has increased by the third most of any province over the last 3 years.
Okay. Appreciate it, sir.
That's Ken.
Have a good one.
Have a good day.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Let's welcome Paula to the show. Paula, how are you?
Oh, hi, Dan. I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Well, first, may I say thanks for taking my call. I love the show.
Appreciate
really
that.
informative.
Thank you.
But I remember when Rick moderated the show years ago, and he used to say, I think it was his motto, if you're not outraged,
You're not paying attention.
listening.
It's written on the wall right here.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a great motto. So I guess you probably know that I've been listening to some things, so I'm outraged. And
now you're paying attention,
call.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, what's on your mind?
It's about the Remembrance Day ceremony.
Okay.
Now, we hear that the Prime Minister, Trudeau, wants the country to silence the military chaplains from saying the words prayer, God, Jesus Christ, from the Remembrance Day ceremony. And this troubles me very much.
I heard all of those words at the Ottawa ceremony this year. I watched it.
Okay, well, what happened was they came up with this last October of 23.
Okay.
And there was an outrage then. And so they said, okay, so for then you can, for last Remembrance Day, we'll just let it go. And then they formed a committee, as governments love to do, to look into it. And guess what, Dan? The committee hasn't come to a conclusion yet. So hence, I guess they're still allowing it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I heard all of those words and more during the ceremony that I watched.
Well, that's good. But I'm outraged because just to even think that this should be allowed, let chaplains do what chaplains do best, and that's certainly to pray in a Remembrance Day ceremony.
Can't argue with that, Paul. I think that chaplains have a place in the ceremony, and it should always have a place in the ceremony.
Yes, and the our soldiers went to war. War is hell, and they fought for our rights for freedom. And you wonder, do they fight in vain? Because now, if this is how things are going, I think we're going downhill pretty darn fast.
Paula, appreciate your call. Got to take a break.
Okay.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. I think that I can't speak for veterans that fought during the war that she's referring to, but I know there are some veterans that have fought in conflicts and wars since that may want to sound off on that. I would suggest that maybe they fought for many different reasons, including our rights to choose and to have freedom of religion in this country. 902-405-6000 is the number. The Mid-Week Meltdown will continue after the news. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Back in minutes. Just seeing some more pictures from the photo op of the Oval Office. Donald Trump, by the way, is in Washington, D.C. today, and he's meeting with Joe Biden in the Oval Office. But they do this sit down in front of the fireplace Oval Office picture photo op for all the journalists that are there, and it looked to me, with the exception of the odd smile, that it was the last place on earth that Donald Trump wanted to be. He just looked like he was like, all right, let's do this. Let's get on. I'm done. I don't want to deal with this guy anymore. Anyway, again, love to be a fly on the wall during that conversation. Let's go back to the phone lines. 902-405-6000 is the number. We welcome Tim to the program. Tim, how are you?
Oh, doing great, Dan. How are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
Not a whole lot. I just heard a couple of comments about something that I was just bashed around for my 32 years in Nova Scotia in my own head, the election signs. So, I mean, obviously they're a hot topic. I haven't listened, to every show, so forgive me if I'm repeating something.
Sure.
But just just from my standpoint, obviously election time, whether it's municipal, provincial, federal, we always see them pop up everywhere. People's lawns, corners of streets. It's great to see, whether it's businesses or homeowners feeling proud to show their political colors, who they're affiliated with, all fine and good. What I'm kind of curious about is sort of I think one of the callers, or maybe even yourself, said something about it being perfectly fine to put the signs everywhere. I was just curious what the rules are, because like myself, I'm a small business owner, and the advertising, the places that I'm allowed to advertise and the ways I'm allowed to advertise, there's a lot of restrictions in terms of what I can and can't do.
You're not. Can you imagine if you were able to slap it up on every median and every parkette and everything else?
Every green space, literally every green space has a sign on it, which, once again, I wouldn't be as opposed to having this political awareness be so upfront with everyone, because I think, we're in an age where a lot of people are heads down in your phone all the time. You don't necessarily even look up to out of your own daily life a lot of the time. So I guess what I'm driving at is I just don't see the benefit of having all these signs. It almost becomes a bit of a popularity contest where it's like I guess I just don't understand if there was a way for them to maybe express their platform a little bit better on some of these signs, or
it'd be hard to read then, right? I mean, holy smokes,
you know what I mean?
I get it. Tim,
slogans, or
Tim, I've often come on here and berated election signs. The way that I look at it is this: if you're able to convince a homeowner or a business owner to put a lawn sign in there on their property in their yard, then more power to you. But this,
I guess it's
this ridiculousness of plunking them down in all these green spaces and public spaces and parkettes and ends of streets and on corners and those kind of things, it looks awful. And you're right.
It just seems to serve a little to no benefit, because, as I said, I'm seeing it kind of becomes just like a bit of a popularity contest where it's like, oh, I see enough red signs around. Well, I better vote red with everybody else around here. So it's like, I just wish there was a little bit more of because I find one of my biggest things with our current politics at all levels is, the disconnect between sort of the regular person and what sort of the policies are. Like we're finding, or I'm finding anyway, just in talking with people from the public every day, a lot of people don't even know what sort of the platform of the government is, or our current government is. So it's like to even delineate between the two parties is sometimes very challenging. And for a sort of a young voter, how are they going to make that decision? Is it because based on how many faces or how many signs they see in their neighborhood, or is it, based on the ideas that they have? Because, you look at some of the previous policies, like I guess the provincial election, just, because we're currently in one, would be a great example of this. You look at some of the things that some of your previous callers were alluding to, that Mr. Houston and just the current government of ours had promised going into this sort of, sitting period, 4 years. One of them, the big slogan, I think you'll remember, was the better paycheck guarantee.
I still haven't seen that one, right? Yep.
Well, and I remember actually, because when I voted, I don't vote often, and it's more just because I don't feel I'm informed enough to. So then this last provincial election, I actually voted. I voted for Mr. Houston under the pretense of all of the promises that he made, and then looking back on it, sort of from a objective standpoint here now, it's kind of looking like, okay, well, he didn't really do anything he was going to say. So I guess on a macro level, and I hate to kind of compare them because it's federal and provincial, but you kind of look at the direction that Mr. Poilievre and the federal Conservatives are headed, and kind of a similar trajectory. You're building support. You hate the opposition. We want to get this guy out, and then it's like almost like the rug was pulled out from under us once he was in. And I mean, it's not uncommon as a politician for you to promise things and then not be able to deliver. But I guess the long story is I just feel like we need, as voters, a little bit more avenues, like to understand what our local platforms are. I mean, I know they are out there. There's towns, like in my town of Stuyak, we've had some town halls and different, things with our candidates. And we only had one, but he did come out and answer questions and kind of provide, put a face to a name. And I guess maybe I'm just not looking for enough of those opportunities. But as I say, it's just I find they're very quick to slap their signs up, but they don't really tell you what they're going to do, I guess is the bottom line of my sort of spiel.
Tim, I appreciate the call. Have a good one.
No worries. You too. Thanks.
902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. If you can convince me as a property owner or a business owner to put an election sign in my yard because I support you and I support what your plan is, and I trust you as a politician, then by all means, put them up in every yard you can. But keep them out of the parkettes. Keep them. I know they're not in the parks, but they're in the parkettes. The municipal election was much worse, I think, than this provincial campaign has been. They were everywhere, and I would be interested to see if there's any research or any studies done. And I know there's a lot of smart people that listen to this radio station that maybe have looked into this. But has an election sign ever changed the way that somebody votes? I mean, you get to see and know who your candidates are in your specific riding or your district. But has it ever changed your mind? Driving down the Bedford Highway and you've seen a sign for so-and-so or for such and such a party, like, yep, that's it. That made my mind up. I'm voting for this party or this person. I don't know if that ever happens. And is it a popularity game? Is it part of this? Well, I saw a whole bunch of Ulstrand party signs in my neighborhood, so he must be poised to win, so I'm going to vote for him because I want to vote for the winner. Is that why we do it? 902-405-6000. Let's go back to the phones. Dave, how are you?
Hi, how you doing, Dan?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Well, I don't want to take up too much time here, but I think you did a great job. Excellent. You helped out when I ran for municipal. You guys did a great job at having a really balanced conversation. What I'm talking about is Coffeegate. That's what I guess Zach would want to see. I have no problem with someone giving out coffee. I did it before, but it was at private events. And I think where you cross the line is where they were publicly giving out these free coffee cards to people publicly. If it was a closed event, say, okay, we're having candidate XYZ, and we're inviting you to come by for coffee, that would be a different story. But and if they gave me a donut, I might vote for them too. Right? But that's one of the things I said that I definitely I think it's great giving out things to people as long as it's a private event. Like I said, that's where I draw the line. I think that they made a mistake. There should have been an event, say, okay, next week we're going to meet at Tim Hortons, and everyone come by and have a coffee.
Right, instead of camping out in the drive-through and handing out gift cards. I get it.
Yeah, I did that before one time a few elections ago, and I got trouble from the store itself. Told me, please don't do it on our property because we don't want to support any candidate.
Okay, cool.
And I agree. So, and the other issue was signs. Imagine if we had 16 candidates like I did when I ran for mayor on the lawn. Be 16 signs everywhere. I had 300 signs stolen from me, ripped off properties, and they cost candidates a lot of money. And I see these sign wars that go on. But realistically, like I said, Gloria McCluskey said to me about 3 weeks ago that signs don't win elections, people do.
Yep.
And I think that's the one thing that we got to concentrate on. I'm sorry, I'm trying to rush through the answers so I don't take too much of your time.
No, Dave, I appreciate it. Now, let me ask you this question. You said you had 300 signs stolen. Do you think it was just people that are being people, or do you think there was an effort, or how do you think that rolled out?
Well, I hate to do scandals or anything. I don't think it was any of the candidates. I think it was maybe some group of people that were just, who were angry with the politicians altogether. I mean, it was a time when we had controversy going on in Ottawa, and some people don't know one level of government from another.
Right.
And I think it was just an attack against all politicians. But unfortunately, I had my signs was more prominent, so they had to be taken down at that time or stolen.
Dave, appreciate your call. Have a good one.
Sure, thanks. Have a great one.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. All of my angst against election signs aside, it's not cool to steal them. It really isn't. As much as they may annoy you and everything else, these candidates are, and particularly in a municipal campaign, they're running on their own dime, for the most part. Some maybe not, but most are running on their own dime, and they're expensive, right? And, they've gone through the effort. Yeah, the rules are ambiguous. And, yeah, there's exemptions for political signs and yada, yada, yada. That all being said, stealing them it's just not cool. Need to stop down, take another break. The open hour, the Mid-Week Meltdown continues on the other side of it. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ulstrand. We are back in minutes.
Thanks.
Welcome back. Mid-Week Meltdown continues. Lots of open lines. If you want to get in and do a quick hitter, as Rick used to call them, 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Your chance to talk about whatever it is on your mind. Let's go back to the phones. We welcome Bill to the show. Bill, how are you?
Well, I'm kind of disturbed over this here thing that happened about the uniforms and so on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I joined the PLF there, Halifax Brigade. I never got overseas. I was too young to get over, and I used to be so proud to come out of that armories there on Remembrance Day with a pit helmet there, with a white helmet thing and the red uniform, the whole thing. In fact, you'll see about the Sidlow Hill. There's a couple on each side there as you go in. This was the stirring music there, coming up and going down to the parade square. Really, you know, this was a big part of me, and it bothers me to think how much of this is going on in not just schools, but wherever organizations where, you know, my attitude on this very simple is this, you know, if you come into the country, I shouldn't get into this, but if you come into the country, this is the way we are, Canadians.
And we don't, Bill. We don't know that this person that made this decision was not maybe from a family of Nova Scotians that's 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 generations long. We don't know who it was.
Good
right.
point.
So we got to be careful with where we go with this.
This is what I'm driving at to check it out to see is it widespread, not very much or whatever.
Fair.
But I'll tell you it was quite sad thing there to see that there. I had a pretty good session there. I never got down to the parade square, but we at Northwood had our own ceremony right there, and felt pretty good to do that. The other one other little thing is this here idea for the what do you call them, the post office.
Yep.
Curious. You know, when they talk about going down to the Parker Street Food Bank or whatever, that's something should be checked too. God knows how many people going away there more than they should. But the bottom line is this here. What I want to say is, what does anybody know how much the post office people are looking for an hour now?
Oh, I asked them. They don't haven't told me what they've asked for, but I know that they have been offered. I think it was almost 11% over 4 years increase.
So what they get now? Do you think?
I have no idea.
Well, I'll tell you, there's some pretty wild things out there. I mean, I think down at Boeing, I think they're looking for 35% or something, and there's another big one with the stevedores out there. Anyway, appreciate it, Todd. I mean, Dan.
Have a good one, Bill. Appreciate it, sir. 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. Let's welcome Owen to the program. Owen, how are you?
Great. Yourself?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Well, it disturbs me that our veterans were told, not to wear their uniforms during Remembrance Day. I will go back. Canada has always been known for the RCMP and Beavers. Years ago, it went to court where a Sikh was allowed to wear his turban because he was a member of the RCMP. This actually went to court. Okay? Now, that's one. Now, number two, anyone in Canada can legally carry around a pocket knife with a blade of less than 3-4 inches. And yet there's been instances in Brampton where they are carrying the Gurkha, which is about a foot-long sword, as part of their religion. There have also been weddings done in Vancouver where there are...
I don't understand where you're going with this, Owen. There's exemptions for religious stuff all over the place, and that's an exemption for religious beliefs.
Let's talk about firearms, okay? If I were to have a wedding and have a bunch of AK-47...
Where's that a religious thing? I need you to show me where it says in somebody's religion that you can bring an AK-47 to a wedding. Show me.
Apparently, it's a tradition.
No. All right, Owen, I appreciate the call, man. 902-405-6000. Wow. The six and the turbans, the Supreme Court ruled on that. So that's a thing. And it's a religious exemption for them to carry a ceremonial dagger. We've been down this road many times before. I stand to be corrected that there is a religion out there that says you need to bring an AK-47 to a wedding, and that has a religious exemption. If you can show me that, by all means, show me that. I just don't understand. I really don't. 902-405-6000, wide open lines if you want to get on. Tomorrow on the program, we've got a pretty busy show lined up for you. We're going to have a conversation about a new campaign or an advertising campaign that NSLC has launched, urging customers to choose their products as opposed to, and I'm talking about the cannabis, as opposed to, going to maybe the guy down the street or around the corner kind of thing. And Dr. Simon Sherry, who we've had on this program a number of times, is taking exception to that, calling it, in fact, false advertising. We'll have a conversation with Dr. Sherry about what this means as part of our program tomorrow. Also, I don't know if you saw the story or have been following this at all, but there's a study that's going on, and it's bringing some of these old maps of Halifax to the surface. Some of these maps that date back almost as early as the founding of our city in the late 1700s. And these maps and this study are looking at the number of buildings that were built over that long period of time, and the old buildings that remain. And old maps are fascinating to me. We'll have a conversation with SMU's Jonathan Fowler. He's a researcher. He's working on this project. I hope that you can join in, because it's a fascinating talk about the amount of history that we've lost already when it comes to architecture and to buildings, and the number that are still around, because the number kind of made me raise my eyebrows that there's that many buildings that are that old around here. We will have that conversation as part of the program tomorrow. Let's go back to the phone lines. 902-405-6000. Fred, how are you?
Oh, not too bad, Dan. I'm a professional driver, and I can tell you today, with this blustery wind, the biggest vandal is the wind on these signs.
Right? They're everywhere.
Posts all over the place. Having said that, signs do not assist you to vote, but they do foster discussion, especially if you got one on your lawn. And because you feel so strongly for that person or that political candidate, other people around you ask, well, why? There might be something I'm missing. And that breeds to more signs and other signs, and subsequently that's how you get the vote out of the sign area. On the side streets, it's just advertisement as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. No, Fred, I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Yep, bye.
902-405-6000. We're out of time. I appreciate each and every one of you that took time out of your day to dial the numbers and call the program. I appreciate it. You make my day each and every day that you do it. To our guests, thank you very much for joining us on the program and sharing your knowledge. It certainly makes for a much more interesting show than listening to me ramble for 3 hours. A special thank you to Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass, who does outstanding work fielding all of your calls and keeping me in line. Because, well, as I've said many times, it's not an easy job to do. As I mentioned, tomorrow we're going to have a conversation about an advertising campaign urging you to buy legal weed as opposed to buying it from perhaps the person down the street. Dr. Simon Sherry will be joining us to talk about that. We're going to talk about disappearing history in Halifax. And also, we're going to revisit our segment. We're going to do a 30-minute segment tomorrow about asking the pharmacist. This will give you an opportunity to ask some questions of a certified pharmacist in Nova Scotia if you have some questions about the services that they provide. Because remember, as of late, pharmacies have been given more leeway on dealing with small things like strep throats and ear infections and those kind of things. Pam Kennedy will be joining us to talk about it. Also, we'll continue our focus on the election campaign. Green Party leader Anthony Edmonds will be joining us as part of the program to tell us a little bit about what the Greens have in store for this election as we get closer. We're less than 2 weeks out now. Again, thank you very much to everybody that joined the show today. Make sure that you stay out of trouble, and remember, be kind to one another.